How do you not get completely anxious and terrified at the state of the world today? I actually disabled my Facebook account in January and my mental health has dramatically improved. Not having a stream of awful news and awful people being fed to you 24/7 is a great first step. Getting off social media. Before, if something bad happened, unless it was something global, it was relegated to page 7 of the local paper or on the 10 p.m. local news. Now everybody can see all the bad things all over the world happening in real time. En masse, it changes your way of thinking, how you perceive the world. You think, it was never like this in the old days. We didn't have all these terrible things happening one after another. Yes, it was. Millions of terrible things happened every day. Kidnappings, domestic violence, school shootings, drug addiction, child molestation, people put in prison by their government, famine, starvation, war, etc., etc. You just didn't really know about it. Close your computer and put your phone away. I don't even know about all the shit that's going on in my city because, naturally, I wouldn't know. And #X200B. You're only aware if you're stuck to a screen. That's my secret cap. I'm always anxious. Turn off social media. 1. I don't use any social media except for Reddit and YouTube. 2. I am not immortal. 3. I will not be having any children. Because the state of the world has always been shit. Humans have always believed that things used to be better and now it's getting worse. Nothing special, nothing new, want change. As George Carlin wisely stated in an interview, detach yourself from the suffering in the world, and treat it like a show. That's what I've been doing. Now it feels like I'm viewing everything muffled behind a glass. What I see around me would drive me insane, if I did not know that no matter what happens, God will have the last word, Saint Pisceos. But honestly at this point I've just tried to move on from the anxiety. I got really sucked into the doom spirals of Reddit for a while and it really didn't do a lot of good for me. At this point, I have just accepted that the truth is the future will be so outright weird that saying it will be better, or worse, is not going to go well. Either things will get better in the long run or it will very suddenly and decisively not matter anymore. Easy. What's the point of being scared? What kind of a life would we be living if we were in constant fear? Humans have come through difficult times before, and we can do it again, but not by being scared. Live in the moment. Be glad you're alive today. Be glad you have things and people you love, and don't get worked up over something we can't control. Smiley face. I focus on my life and my people. This might seem narcissistic, but it literally doesn't help to mourn the world. It's important knowing what's happening in the world though, especially when you are in a position to change things to the better. Years of severe, often suicidal depression has left me unable to feel much of anything. Spending nearly a decade wanting to die has a way of making you utterly unconcerned about most things, so I can look at shit as it is now and just shrug. It'll probably end badly. Whatever. Over the years I have gotten much better at focusing my anxiety on situations where I can and should be doing something and am not, versus things I can't really do anything about. This makes anxiety a tool. This has the added bonus of focusing me on the more immediate and tangible things in my life, as that correlates. Things are actually better today than basically any other point in history. There's less war, less poverty, and people live longer lives. Literally every objective measure you can think of is better today than at almost any point in history. I read a book called The Rational Optimist. It may help you feel better about things. We definitely have major challenges we have to face as a civilization. I have no reason to expect we can't figure things out or adapt. Medication. Beer, and a lot of it. Easy. We're all already dying. So, there's really nothing to worry about. Why be afraid of something that's inevitable? Do you fear the rising of the sun, or the falling of the leaves in the autumn? Plus, I have clean water, fresh food, and a roof over my head. I'm doing better than the majority of people in human history. Maybe I just have anxiety. Lol. My granddad survived Holodomor. WW2. My parents were born second-class citizens into a war-ravaged dictatorship. What am I mad about? Twitter? GTFU. We're literally living in the best times. Can't think about it. Can't read about. Gotta avoid it or I will become paralyzed with hopelessness. Because everything we do has no meaning anyway. We could completely wipe ourselves out and all the rest of life on the planet and it would be good again in a few 100 billion years. Or not, which doesn't really matter. In less than 100 years I won't even exist. So drama in the world, life, death, destruction, violence, etc., is the dynamics of what makes life interesting. Without it the world would be boring. Think about it. Mary Jane always makes things not so bad. I'm 62 years old. I have been a news junkie since age 11 delivering the morning paper. 3 things to keep in mind about your attitude in life. 1. There is an industry in all media and information sources that profit economically and otherwise by pushing controversy and doom and gloom fear. It gives many elites power over others. Know this fact and maintain a healthy skepticism of information fed to you that excites your emotions. 2. Develop a strategy to address anxiety by taking actions that limit the negative impacts of fears and anxiety. Anything from regular exercise to feeding the homeless. 3. Learn about yourself and schedule things on a regular basis to recharge and renew your mindset to approach things positively. Lastly, know that we actually live in the best of times for mankind. People today have access to more of everything than in any other time in known history. Even the low middle class today can live better than elites just a couple decades ago. I realize there's nothing I can do about it, and I have a morbid curiosity about what will happen over the next 40 years. It's quite simple actually. Not to say that it's easy, but it's simple. I always keep thinking. The more time I spend worrying about the current state of everything around the world, the less time I'll have to focus on improving myself to the point where I might make a difference. Hope it helps. 07. I got really into aliens and conspiracies. It's not for everyone, but the world is a lot easier to digest when you try to connect everything to reptilian overlords instead of accepting that our society is just actually that awful. Understand history. You might see this 6 are the world in many ways as vastly better than ever before. Because the world has had it worse. Every generation thinks their crisis is the ultimate problem the world has faced. Honestly, the world was worse in the past. People look back with rose-tinted glasses. We live in a time with minimal wars compared to the past. COVID is but a drop compared to past epidemics. The job market is relatively stable. In the developed world, politics is very centralized compared to past. Sure, the world is worse than it was in say 2018 or 2019, but it's a lot better than 1918 or 1919. The trick is to be extremely anxious about something else. Can't worry about the state of the world if you're constantly paranoid that your house is going to burn down because you forgot to unplug your TV. If you worry about all the little things, you can't worry about the big things. Works like a charm. There's been scary stuff forever. The world was at war 44 years before I was even born. People had to turn their lights off so we wouldn't have bombs dropped on us from the sky. And at the same time millions of people were being murdered in concentration camps in the same continent because of their religion. And that's just one example of a time in history when things were very shit. There's really no point in wasting your life being terrified of bad things when realistically I have a pretty safe and relatively easy life. I smoke a lot of weed. I think about my friends who have survived worse, refugees and immigrants, and think about the archy of history. We've made it through a lot of terrible times. Hoping for the best. I've decided to basically ignore it and move on because there's no point in me worrying about it. Well, no one's trying to kill me, so I just trudge on. Imagine. Only a few 100 years ago, a bunch of dudes could ride into your village, kill all the men, rape and kidnap all the women, and sell the children into slavery. And nobody could do anything about it because it happened at night and there was no way to fight or follow them. Shit is pretty fucking good right now, my dude. State of world is certainly better than Great Depression, World War I, World War II, Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, US crime, crack epidemic post-1980s. For gay people and minorities in America, it's fairer than any time in US history. If you are still terrified of the world, it means that you are either too young or previously did not want to notice how terrible the world is. What should I be freaking out about, exactly? There are people born just in time of the world wars who had a high probability of dying. They had something to fear. By realizing that most of that stuff isn't directly affecting me. My white privilege shields me. You need therapy if you are terrified? Also turn off the news. It's all exaggerated. Turn off news, dumbass. It's very easy. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV? I just realize it's probably better to live now than in the Dark Ages. How people completely demonize each other for having different opinions. People used to be more chill and actually have conversations. Now it turns into a flame war with fallacies and ad hominems everywhere. I just don't think about it, and look for new food to eat. First, it's probably not gonna affect you directly, majorly. These are huge problems that affect many people slightly and a few people drastically. Unless you're one of the unlucky ones, it'll mostly just be background to things like your car breaking down or having relationship issues. Second, a lot of these problems are mitigated or even go away. Remember the ozone hole, Y2K? So don't mistakenly think that every portent of doom is gonna happen. There are many real problems, and of course many of the problems that do go away only do so with great effort. But the news shows us the worst case scenario. Do what you can. That's both admirable and necessary. But realize that your life is probably not going to be ruined anytime soon. Because it's out of my control and there is nothing I can do about it. Just take solace in the fact that you cannot do anything about a large part of the things happening daily, and just don't worry about them. Affect the things you can. Just ignore the things you can't do anything about. Focus on what you can control. My thought is that as a singular person, I can't really do anything about anything that goes on in the world. As such, it would be bad for me to take the weight of all the fear I'm supposed to feel. I'd say I'm also rather optimistic and I don't overanalyze the terrible situations that happen around the world. I do feel those emotions to an extent, but then I remember I can't do anything about it myself without time and resources, which I do not have, and the feelings generally subside. I read somewhere that it's not that the world is necessarily that more things are happening than before, it's that news now gets around extremely fast to various individuals with different schools of thought, whereas in the past it wouldn't make it as far, nearly as quickly. The state of the world today isn't any different than it has been any other day of human history. Point to any day on a calendar that didn't have people killing each other for no good reason, politicians lying to get their way, governments floundering in their failed attempt to suppress the people, or any other horrifying situation. You won't find one, because that's every day of human life from the get-go. Turn off the news. That's a start. Delete Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and any other social media, news sites that cram the world's problem down your tiny, singular, and helpless throat. Going to reshare this comment from last time the topic came up, in case it helps. I read a thing years ago. Can't find it right now, but it made a great analogy with deer. A deer in the woods is aware of its surroundings, maybe 50 to 100 yards in any direction, so if there's a predator that's close enough to be a danger, they can avoid it. If there's a wolf a mile away, or 2 miles, or 100 miles, the deer doesn't know that. It doesn't need to. A wolf that far away is no threat. Now, imagine you're a deer, but now you're aware of threats miles away, or hundreds of miles, or thousands of miles away. In fact, you might be more aware of threats on the other side of the world than you are of the wolf 50 yards away. If you're this deer, you're going to fucking lose your mind. The only thing in your mind is threats, everywhere, constantly, to the point where you can't even function. Thanks to the internet and the global 24-hour news cycle, we're aware of threats, and tragedies, and disasters, and horribleness, everywhere, in every corner of the world, all the time. We can't do anything about most of it. It's not information we can act on in any meaningful way. It just occupies space on our heads as a terrible thing that, for some reason, we feel like we need to be aware of. That it's important, somehow, for us to be aware of these things. This is not to say there aren't things happening elsewhere in the world that we should try to be aware of, because in some cases we can help. We can try to raise awareness or lean on our elected representatives to impact things like For example, the plight of the Palestinians or the Uyghurs. But if you live in New York and some rondo gunnut shoots a dozen people in Seattle, how does that knowledge make your life better? What meaningful action are you going to take, based on that information? In most cases, none. It's a wolf 5,000 miles away. It's just a lump of anxiety that you opted to put into your head that you can't do anything about. TLDR. Don't bury your head in the sand, but remember that most things in the news are not relevant to your life in any actionable way, and the more you immerse yourself in them, the more anxiety you're taking on that you don't need in your life. Try to focus more on the news in your neighborhood or city or state, things you might actually be able to do something about, and if you don't have the inclination or spoons to absorb a bunch of stress about things happening elsewhere in the world, realize that you don't have to. Just let it go. I had to start with Reddit. I removed almost all the default subreddits so I didn't have to see that trash every day. This is what the average feed looked like when I let Reddit run the show. The world is ending. These nations are looking at starting a war. China is terrifying, but don't forget Russia. Florida man on the loose sets off a string of meth house explosions. Children are more depressed than ever. Why, this is your fault. Global warming is now past the tipping point, for real. These animals are now extinct because their bones are needed to be ground up for boner pills. Politicians are breaking more promises. And now here's a lovely animation by Kurzgesagt on how you're an irrelevant human being in the great cosmos and you should be fucking grateful to even experience it. You wasteful carbon-based life form. I hope you get nuked or an asteroid wipes you out. And #X2OOB. With Reddit fixed, I only see fun, pleasant memes and stuff related to what I actually care about. If something important is happening globally, you can usually be sure it'll slip into your sphere of influence no matter how far you distance yourself. It sounds selfish, but at some point you have to stop caring and enjoy your personal slice of tranquility. You're allowed to care again and be anxious and terrified, but you have to accept the world around you as chaos, and all you can sometimes do is take care of yourself and loved ones. I pay very close attention to what I can control and make peace with the idea that everything else is just something that I have to live with. A good portion of nihilism and absurdism. Thanks for watching. See you later.